The Green New Deal crazies are at it again. Massachusetts far-left senator and environmental extremist Ed Markey is blaming Trump and climate change for the deadly forest fires in LA. Now, it is currently under investigation, but the latest theory suggests these fires in the Palisades were started by celebratory New Year's Eve fireworks. But, of course, according to Ed Markey, these are symptoms of a warming planet. Markey is accusing Trump, who is not in office yet, for teaming up with big oil to kill the Green New Deal, jump-starting the death and destruction in California. The far left will do anything to take accountability for their actions, or take no accountability, rather, for their actions on the failed policies that led to an incompetent show pony governor in Sacramento and no water in the fire hydrants. Will Democrats continue to put these accusatory statements ahead of doing what is right for the people of California? Will the public fall for it? Joining us now, Congressman from Georgia's 7th District, U.S. Marine and Dr. Rich McCormick. Welcome back.
Good to be with you today. Thanks for having me.
Great to have you back. What's your response to Senator Markey and his colleagues who are now changing the narrative around this fire to really divert it away from Democrats?
Yeah, well, that's what they always do. When you don't do what's responsible, when you don't do things to actually shore yourself up against something that was predictable. When I lived in California, stationed there as a Marine, we had fires then as well. California is a very dry place, lacking in water, lacking in a plan, a visionary plan to keep fires from happening in these neighborhoods. You can't keep celebrities from firing off fireworks, but I tell you what, you suffer your own consequences. You're now seeing people set fires on purpose so they can loot places in California.
Right.
But quite frankly, when you talk about global warming, it has nothing at all to do with this. This is where the warp science comes in. There's a really good book by a guy named Koonin, Koonin, who wrote a book called Unsettled. Now, he was a Democrat, and he's a physicist, and he was on Obama's Climate Change Commission. He wrote a very good book showing that since the advent of humans' intervention or impact on climate, yes, you may have a little bit higher carbon content, but actually the overall benefits have been good for humankind. We've had higher crop productions. We've had fewer hurricanes. We've had fewer people that have died in catastrophes. When you talk about carbon dioxide as a portion of the atmosphere, you're talking about 0.04% of the atmosphere, of which only 11% of that is produced by humans. We need to have a realistic conversation about what's happening in our environment, how we're going to shore ourselves up against future climate change, whether it's man-made or not, but it's certainly not in reducing our carbon imprint and putting us at a disadvantage when compared to the rest of the world. It makes no sense. They want to put us in the poorhouse and not make the United States the leaders of the world like we are.
Let me ask you this. In terms of the reaction, you may or may not know the answer to this, but why did it seem to take so long for Governor Newsom to call up the National Guard in this case? It seems like they were utilizing prisoners to fight fires, less experienced people, and they did not really call up the National Guard, which I thought was what you would normally do if you're in a state of emergency, as clearly this seemed to be. Why not call the Guard sooner?
Yeah, a super slow reaction, coupled with probably concerns over his budgetary process. I know California is always hamstrung on their budget because they spend way too much on illegal people who come there, on people who milk the system instead of working. They don't have a system set up for success. They tax the top bracket of income earners at 57% when you combine federal and state taxes. This guy has no idea what he's doing, but what I hear is he's gearing up to write a book and release that and tour and start campaigning for 2028 to be the president of the United States. Hopefully everybody's paying attention to what this guy is actually really about. He's a smooth talker, but he is not good at managing.
Budget? This is one of the richest states in the union. I mean, I hope, Congressman, that your constituents in Georgia are not going to be expected to pay for the damage that has been done, to the horrible damage that's been done in Southern California. But Southern California is still one of the wealthiest states in the union. They generate a lot of money. Why are they having budgetary problems here? And I hope they're not going to ask the rest of us to fund them.
they will 100% ask us to fund them. And this is the problem with the budgetary process. We get done with the reconciliation package, we get everything in, and all of a sudden another emergency comes up. This is typical of government. We always react instead of being proactive. Coolidge 100 years ago was back to basically come up with a FEMA type organization because the Mississippi plains flooded. And he said, no, that's not the responsibility of the government. I will be the spokesperson for the American Red Cross if you want, but we're going to make this philanthropic. We're going to make sure people help people, but we don't want a permanent agency for something that we don't know what the next emergency is going to be for, in which you'll have to employ people permanently. You're going to have pilfering like you had this year and this coming year, where 40% of the FEMA emergency funds go towards, guess what? COVID in 2024 and 2025, because long-term contracts that pilfer the system, so that what we're going to have to do is vote on an emergency funding bill for this California relief. Guaranteed it's probably going to pass with bipartisan support. It's going to be very frustrating to watch this happen. It's predictable. It's not fair, and it's what California does. California has always pilfered the federal system. They use their leverage with the leadership, and it really is horrible for the rest of us.
Well, I mean, we saw how well it worked out for North Carolinians who had Trump signs in their yards when they were hit by a hurricane. FEMA officials, politicized, basically said, don't go into houses with Trump signs. The inevitable politicization of these agencies is also another phenomenal argument against them. But speaking of money, this other separate scandal has popped up amongst your Democrat colleagues and for Governor Newsom. Newsom is getting heat for having raised funds for the fire by asking people to donate to his Act Blue super PAC. And Act Blue takes nearly 4% per donation. So yes, money is going to these organizations, but you're also throwing money into the Democrat Party till. Your reaction?
100% corrupt. First of all, the amount of money that comes off the top of that is not justified. That company should absolutely waive that, especially for this sort of crisis, really. And then secondly, they shouldn't be raising money through a super PAC that's meant specifically for Democrats, that's politicizing it from the very get-go. When you think about what Act Blue does, what its entire intent is for, and where that money is going to be disseminated, you have no idea if it's going to be given to anybody who's in crisis. Certainly Mel Gibson's house burned down. Do you think that money is going to go to him? Heck no. This is something that's going to be politicized. It's going to be used for the Democrat Party to use against the Republicans, to not really get done what is supposed to be done, which is help people in need. That should be done through a bunch of rich people in California who should be more than ready to give up their assets to help their fellow Californians to bail themselves out of this horrible situation, which it is horrible. And I have compassion. I used to live in SoCal, and I get it. But once again, the richest state in the union should be able to help itself.
Well, I agree with you. It sounds like Congress, your colleagues in Congress, will all be discussing ways to help California with taxpayer money. Charlie Kirk, the conservative commentator on his program, suggested that we withhold federal aid until the fire chief of LA is fired. Clearly, all leadership in LA should be fired, it seems, to the rest of the world. But that's not so obvious within the ranks. It's not so obvious in California. The fire chief, instead of resigning, has been laying blaming Mayor Bass publicly, blaming all these other factors except for themselves. Would Congress ever entertain a scenario where funds are withheld until leadership is altered?
Well, we've put conditions on federal funds over and over again. As a matter of fact, that's the way that we have great leverage. In some ways, that can be good. In some ways, it can be very bad. That's the whole point of the education, the part of education, where they basically take your money, they take a portion out of that for administrative purposes, and then they give it back to you with strings attached, where you can only spend that money the way we want you to. Only if you uphold your end of the bargain, whatever we want you to do. So, yeah, absolutely. It's not unprecedented at all. Quite frankly, the people should be calling for this guy's head. Just like they did with the district attorney of San Francisco when they're allowing all that crime to happen in San Francisco. When people misbehave and that pendulum is swung far, the people should always react, do a recall on this guy, call for his resignation. There should be so much pressure from that public to do the right thing, to get rid of this person, that should be overwhelming. And there are consequences for mismanagement. I think California has seen it time and time and time again. The legal system is corrupt. Their political system is corrupt. Their immigration system is corrupt. It's the biggest travesty in politics because, quite frankly, California used to be a great place to live. It's where Ronald Reagan is from. They used to have a lot of things going for them, and they have absolutely ruined the system there and pilfered all the unbelievable resources and ingenuity and creativity that came out of California. Now has been just proven to be defunct because of the way they're running their system.
No, that's well summed up. And Elon Musk, I think, put it best. The awakening for California is not going to be in watching how all of this was mismanaged, but the awakening will come for Californians and LA in particular as they try to rebuild and they run into all of this red tape. All of the bureaucratic regulations. We saw regulations holding back firefighting equipment as it was trying to come down from Oregon. California was holding them up over emissions testing. Ridiculous rules that they're cutting their nose in spite of their face. And speaking of failings in leadership, you go to Joe Biden now, the outgoing president who has put all of America through hell, frankly, for the last 4 years. Instead of focusing on the LA fires, President Biden is expected this week to give a series of goodbye speeches. He's looking to cement his legacy. He's going to gaslight us into believing he was some consequential president. And today, he addressed the State Department. Wednesday, he's speaking to the American people. Here's a clip from Biden at the State Department celebrating his tenure as a foreign policy president.
In my view, it was time to end the war and bring our troops home, and we did. I commend the courage of all those who served in Afghanistan. We grieve all 2,461 Americans who made the ultimate sacrifice in the longest war in American history.
So your reaction to Biden's goodbye speeches and, his team trying to gloss over the last 4 years of Biden foreign policy?
So he has cemented his place in history, no doubt about it. In my opinion, he has cemented it as the worst president in American history on foreign policy. If you look at what he did in Afghanistan, that debacle of a withdrawal, and I'm an Afghan veteran, I took it very seriously. Matter of fact, I took it very personally. When you have several Americans die of different services, which was totally preventable. When you see a country turn back over to the very people we took it away from after 20-year investment, $2 trillion, 2,462 lives, just given back. Oh, by the way, with $90 billion worth of military equipment attached, $4 billion which actually were owned by active military personnel in country at the time, which we had no plan to withdraw. We did it hurried. He wanted to have that on his docket as something he achieved. Well, you achieved it all right, buddy. You did it in the worst possible way, the worst withdrawal of all history from the most powerful military in the world versus a third world country terrorist group. And we lost. We lost because of his foreign policy. If you look what he did with the Palestinian debacle, where he basically tried to make everybody happy and made nobody happy. On his watch, you saw Ukraine invaded, Israel invaded, Taiwan threatened by China. This is all part of his foreign policy legacy of weakness and bowing down, kowtowing to powerful countries around the world that want to be our peers but are not our peers, except for that we come through as weak. Weakness will always result in war. Strength through peace is the way it's supposed to be. When President Trump is back, I think you'll see these things resolved quickly.
We're already seeing some of it resolve just at the idea that Trump is returning. But excellent segments, excellent thoughts, Congressman. Thank you very much for the time, and we'll have to have you back on. I wanted to talk about the debt ceiling, but we're all out of time. So thank you very much. We'll see you soon.
Always a pleasure. You have a blessed day. Semper Fi.
Semper Fi. What happens to agriculture in a trade war between the United States and Canada? Sid Miller, Texas Commissioner of Agriculture, has some answers. He'll be right back.